Ladies and gentlemen,
Your Royal Highness, Lord Lieutenant, Vice Presidents and Trust officials, honoured guests and members, welcome to the 81st Annual General Meeting of the WRNS Benevolent Trust, and to the Warrant Officer and Senior Rates Mess here in HMS Excellent. We are grateful to the Mess President, Warrant Officer Mike Reed, for permitting us to use his mess today, and to the resident team for all their support in making today possible. Now, it will not have escaped your notice that today is going to be a slightly longer affair, as following on from the AGM, we will be holding an extraordinary general meeting to permit our WRNS members to take a vote on the future of the Trust. I intend to say a little more in my concluding remarks on this matter, but first we must turn our attention to the formal business of the AGM. Firstly then, I would like to formally open proceedings by inviting Her Royal Highness to address our honoured guests and members.
Chairman, thank you. And members and guests, a very warm welcome to this, the 81st AGM of the WRNS Benevolent Trust. And it's a pleasure to be here at HMS Excellent. And thank you for your hospitality. And it will, of course, I'm going to endeavour to keep this a little bit shorter because you're going on to an important, extraordinary general meeting where there's a real need for a vote on the best course for the Trust's future. I think you've all had proper details of what's about to happen, and feedback has been very good, so I hope that won't take you too long. There are, of course, and on a broader perspective, there have been a lot of turbulent events in the last few years. But I think the WRNS Benevolent Trust has, as always, been that stable, familiar, and very responsive organisation. And for our members, it provides the reassurance that there is an organisation where they can seek assistance when they're in need, and who will understand those needs. Now, in 2022, the Trust spent $250,000 in the delivery of its financial objectives, the full details of which, of course, are in the annual report and will be covered by your Chairman and Treasurer. And as always, the stories from the beneficiaries and their thank yous highlight the difference that makes. And even more amazingly, the legacies have continued to arrive. 181,000 donated and a further 20,000 in the pipeline in this year end. That's extraordinary. And I probably say this every year, but the generosity of these ladies and their legacies seemingly knows no bounds as they remember, I'm assuming fondly, those very special bonds forged by service life. But they also want to be able to assist their former colleagues. So the Trust remains hugely appreciative, of course, but so do the beneficiaries, rather more so, and thankful to all members and supporters for their continued generosity and help. Because as we know, it isn't just about the money, it is about the eyes and ears and keeping in touch with people and being aware of where people might be having difficulty. The Trust, in that sense, is as relevant and responsive as it was as its inception in 1942, although there were, even in 1942, to have that clear understanding that there was going to be a need and you needed to prepare for it was absolutely right. And that remains so. But I think it also requires a degree of change because it's inevitable and it is necessary. And you will have been aware for some time that the Trust has been considering its future structure and governance arrangements, and has been driven by the declining numbers, of course, of our beneficiaries. But you've been aware partly because I mentioned it once or twice as well. And declining numbers is fine, but it does lead inevitably to a situation where the running costs of the charity would be greater than the benevolence expended. Well, that clearly doesn't make sense, and that situation is fast approaching, and no charity wishes to be in that position. So the Trust officials have therefore worked extremely hard on the options which have been distilled into the proposal for the future. And you, as former WRNS and members of the Trust, will be taking a vote on the proposal this afternoon at that especially convened extraordinary general meeting. But be aware that it's the options that have been distilled into the proposal which is key, because it's been clearly well thought through. And it is possibly the most important decision the Trust has made since its foundation, because it is a fundamental change. And it needs to take decisions that will safeguard the interests of all its members for the next 40 to 50 years. So I hope you've all had a chance to read through all the information that has been provided on the proposal. Change can be a little worrying and uncomfortable, but I'm confident that the Trust's team have thoroughly investigated the options for the future. And if any of my other charity hats on indicates that even in the charity world, the goalposts don't so much as move as rotate rapidly. It's a challenge in itself. Managing the transition arrangements with due care and diligence, and will lay the appropriate and enduring foundations for the future as it changes. So whatever happens, I fear that this next year will be an extremely busy one for the Trust. So if you vote through the proposal this afternoon, there is a huge amount of work to be done to make those changes. But that's not at the cost of the beneficiaries. They will remain the most important factor. It's their interests and the funds to support them that must be protected, and accessing assistance must remain as easy as possible. And I think, as everybody has discovered, IT digital world, in theory that is true. In practice, it doesn't apply to everybody. And making those access points as straightforward as possible remain a key to your ability to reach beneficiaries. So the routine activity will, of course, continue, responding to what will probably be a growing need for support. Although extraordinarily, I think both thinking ahead as a Trust and the individuals concerned, the impacts of this last year has not increased the amount of work dramatically, which says an awful lot for those individuals, and also for the Trust who've thought ahead. There is another aspect, of course, which I'm saying this with a straight face. Sometimes the older generation are reluctant to make a fuss and ask for help. But if you are aware of any former WRNS who may be experiencing difficulties, please contact the Trust's offices for advice on how to help them or their families to get the support they may need, but also understand which bit of support they may need most. And as you know, that can vary enormously, from very quite simple things to a slightly more complex look at what they have available. So for all of you who come today for the Trust, to make sure that it does what it says on the tin, but also because of your interest in your colleagues and their future support, thank you for joining us today, for your continued support, to enabling the Trust to continue to fully meet its objectives, both now and most specifically in the future. So I hope you will also have the opportunity to enjoy today, being in this venue, of course, but just also having the opportunity to share a space together, which actually after COVID we still think is a good idea. Anyway.
Your Royal Highness, may I take this opportunity to thank you on behalf of the Trust and its members for the unstinting and very close interest you have always taken in the Trust, its workings and its outputs. You have been our much valued patron for 21 years, and I know members are always very keen to hear what you have to say and have the opportunity to meet you in person. Ma'am, thank you.
Thank you.
Before going any further, I'd just like to introduce the other people on the platform today. So to my left is Commodore Catherine Jordan, Royal Navy, our Vice Chairman, and further down on the left, Sarah Ayton, our General Secretary, and Maggie Bolam, a Trustee and our Honorary Treasurer. So moving through the agenda then, item 2, the minutes of the 80th Annual General Meeting have been circulated by email. Before we vote on their adoption, may I remind you that only those who served in the WRNS, including those WRNS who went on to serve in the Royal Navy, are entitled to vote. Is it the wish of the meeting that the minutes be adopted? May I have a show of hands? Are there any against? I shall now sign them. Thank you. As the Chair, I'll now take you through the usual course of going through our annual report for 2022, picking out points of note and beginning on page 6 with the risks. I won't reiterate what is written there, but suffice to say the Trust continues to take risk management very seriously as unprecedented world and events closer to home continue to have an impact on our business. As far as possible, we put in measures to minimise disruption and ensure the business of the delivering to our beneficiaries can continue unhindered. Case working is now very much back to normal in terms of process, with the Grants Committee now meeting in person, albeit on a reduced frequency to match the number of applications being received. The challenge of COVID has been replaced by the challenge of the cost of living crisis and the need to support those in fuel poverty, those with increasing rents, and the rapidly rising costs of the provision of care. Moving on to page 7 on grants, including those whose regular grants ceased in 2022 and for whom renewal applications were not required, the Trust assisted 110 beneficiaries with one-off or regular grants. This number represented a small increase from 94 in 2021, although that number was massively affected by the pandemic, and so it's better compared to 170 in 2020. A reduction in numbers would be expected due to the decreasing size of the WRNS population, and they are in line with our most recent report from our actuary. Due to the loss of several regular beneficiaries, and our inability to complete some larger one-off complex cases requiring input by local authorities, the total value of grants came in just short of the original budget of £250,000 at £174,000. The level of our regular grants, which are listed on page 7, still compares favourably with those provided by similar charities and are subject to annual review. The flexibility of the weekly support supplement, which may also be used as a temporary measure where an individual's circumstances are expected to improve, remains particularly effective. Similarly, the one-off general amenities grant continues to prove a useful tool, while the number of long-term regular recipients has reduced. Setting regular grants aside, the highest area of expenditure in 2022 of £19,000 was on medical aids. This reflects a close return to pre-pandemic levels and indicates the type of need out there. There are some excellent and sobering examples on pages 9 to 10 as to how some relatively small sums of money that have been awarded make a huge difference to the lives of our beneficiaries and their families. At this point, I'd just like to mention one lady, resident in Spain, whom along with other charities, we were able to provide considerable assistance for. This 76-year-old former Wren and Royal Navy widow has resided in Spain for the past 14 years, but does not wish to return home. The case working authority found her to be in poor mental and physical health. Supporting documentation and clarification of background information was not easy to obtain. However, the perseverance of those involved meant that between the Wrens BT, RNBT, Greenwich Hospital and the Royal British Legion, almost £8,000 was pledged, resulting in bathroom adaptations, a new air conditioning unit, a new bed, a riser recliner chair and a disability scooter. As you can imagine, this has made a significant difference to the quality of this lady's life. Almost half of the 8,000 came from the Wrens BT, meaning she was a recipient of one of our maximum grants. You'll be reassured to know that we have invited her family to provide us with regular updates to ensure that her needs continue to be met. This example, I believe, underlines what can be achieved for those beneficiaries resident overseas, and is a tribute to all the various military charities who are being able to come together to support an individual in considerable need. For information and reassurance in all cases of debt and arrears, applicants are referred to debt management action to bodies such as the Seafarers Advice and Information Line, otherwise known as SAIL, the Step Change Debt Charity and Citizens Advice Bureaus, who all expertly support the often very complex needs of the applicants. Now, the Trust has not increased the maximum one-off grant of £4,000 since 2016, and this level continues to meet need without detriment. Against 3 in 2021, 2 maximum grants were awarded in 2022, both of which were carried forward in part to 2023 and continue to be managed, with just 1 expected to be used in full. The number of applicants approaching the Trust for the first time, number 25, a small increase against 18 in 2021. Returning applicants seeking one-off grants, number 35, an increase from 24 in 2021. Those in receipt of regular charitable payments, number 39, a decrease against 52 in 2021. The graph on page 9 of the report depicts the age breakdown of those we have helped over the past 2 years. In association with this, the number of applicants in their 80s and above has naturally declined by just less than 50% since pre-COVID 2019, as we continue to lose the 1940s and 1950s in-service generation. The number of applicants in their 50s to 70s has declined by 20% since 2019. The number of those below the age of 50 seeking assistance decreases to an ever more negligible number as the bottom age rises to the late 40s. As always, we are very grateful for the support provided by SAFA in particular, the Royal British Legion and the Royal Commonwealth Ex-Services League in identifying potential applicants and beneficiaries. The casework provided through these organisations can be complex, especially regarding our younger applicants. Our grants administrator, Roger Collins, undertakes significant background research to ensure that your grants committee have all the information they need to make the right decisions. The reduction in cases received now allows much more time and care to be spent on current and individual wider needs. As previously mentioned, the Trust works closely alongside other charities, sharing outreach opportunities and possibilities. We're also most grateful for the support of all those individuals and organisations mentioned on pages 13 to 15 of the report. We are always enormously appreciative of those who remember the Trust in their wills and the details of the most generous legacies and in memoriam donations received during 2022 are provided on page 14. And our Treasurer will provide further details of our legacy income in her report. The Trust, as always, remains extremely grateful to the members of the Association of Wrens and Women of the Royal Naval Services for all that they do on our behalf. Details of the totals raised specifically for the Trust by the Association's branches and informal groups are provided on page 15 of the report. As ever, huge thanks are also due to our trustees, the members of the Central, Grants, Finance and Quality Assurance Committees, our transition team, our ambassadors, our General Secretary and Assistant Secretary, and all those willing volunteers who support us throughout the year. One of those willing volunteers we say farewell to on her retirement as a member of our Grants Committee is our talented photographer, Glynis Shaw. We are very grateful, Glynis, for all your support. Thank you. Sadly, at this point, I also have to inform you of the deaths of two of our former committee members in 2022. Kay King was a governor and chair of the Finance Committee from 2003 to 2011. And Margaret Connolly, a member of the Grants Committee for 10 years until 2019, for 10 years until 2019. Taking up social work post-service in the Wrens, Margaret's knowledge of the social care system was invaluable to the work of that particular committee. Fuller obituaries for both of these ladies are on pages 3 and 4. And although her death was just after the turn of the year, it would be remiss of me not to also mention the sad and untimely death of Rosie Wilson. Rosie was the chair of the Trust from 2007 to 2011 and a trustee before that. She led on two hugely successful projects, the first to publish a book on the history of the Trust in 2012 and the second taking on chairmanship of the Wrens 100 Centenary Committee in 2015. While still serving, Rosie was also in the vanguard of the integration of women into the Royal Navy. She was a big personality, widely known and respected, and the huge turnout of people at her memorial service in late May was, I think, testimony to the impact and deep affection felt by so many people. To all three of these ladies, I thank them on behalf of the Trust for their many years of selfless dedication, loyalty and commitment. Each in their own way left their mark, and we will remember them most fondly. I shall now at this point call upon our Treasurer, Maggie Bolam, to present the balance sheet and statement of accounts.
Thank you. Okay. Your Royal Highness, Lord Lieutenant, Vice Presidents and Trust officials, honoured guests and members. The Trust's work is reliant on income returns from its investment portfolio, as it is the only constant source of funds. In addition, however, we are very fortunate to receive generous legacy income and donations from our many loyal supporters. 2022 financial year saw good results for the Trust. The accounts on page 24 of the Statement of Financial Activities show a total expenditure of $474,000 after investment losses of $483,000. Grants awarded were $173,500 and $138,000 was spent on running costs such as salaries, governance and general administration. Disregarding investment losses, we achieved an operating surplus of £9,000. Compared to a deficit of $34,000 in 2021. Our investment portfolio was affected by volatility in global markets and showed a decrease of $483,000 and a valuation of $3.7 million at year-end, down from $4.2 million in 2021. The Trust closed the year with a balance sheet figure of $4.3 million of unrestricted funds to carry forward. And as such, we do not intend to request any grants for 2023. If there were a cash shortfall in the year, we will continue to draw down on the investment portfolio in accordance with our strategic plan. Thus, we do remain a viable entity able to continue to provide benevolence for the coming year. Turning to donations and legacies, which can be found on page 30 of the annual report. Once again, legacies were a substantial contributor to our income. At the end of the year, legacies receipted totaled 162,000, an increase of 41,000 on the previous year, with 5 amounts exceeding 10,000 and the largest being for 40,000. We are so grateful to those ladies who sought to remember us in their wills, and special mention should go to Sylvia Bell, Penny Wright, Lynn Price, Joan Stevenson, Kerry Stone and Paddy Wall. We thank them wholeheartedly. At the year end, we had a further 20,000 remaining in the legacy pipeline, still to be received. I would be remiss if I failed to mention our General Secretary, Sarah Ayton, whose relentless efforts working with solicitors, executors and family members ensure the legacy funds are received into our accounts. In memoriam donations provided £5,750. The Association of Wrens and Women of the Royal Naval Services raised £2,900, including a superb sum of £678 relating to Christmas card sales. Individual donations amounted to £9,500. And as always, we are very grateful to our regular donors. Income from fundraising raised a very healthy £18,240, assisted by donations from other organisations such as the PayPal Giving Fund, Share Gift and Easy Fundraising. Our stalwart supporters, the Wrens Communicators Group and St Anne's Church, raised £550 between them. Nick Carter at HMS Collingwood once again raised £600 for his cap-tallying efforts, and the annual fundraising dinner provided us with £1,100. I would also like to especially mention Mr George Copley, who we were pleased to meet at last year's AGM, and who, together with members of Porters Park Golf Club, raised a handsome sum of £10,000 in memory of his mother, Elizabeth Copley, a former World War II Wren. A truly generous contribution by all, especially as everyone gives their time voluntarily. Turning to our portfolio on page 24, the last year has been challenging for markets on numerous fronts. The war in Ukraine has brought geopolitical uncertainty, added to which the UK saw higher inflation and a significant rise in interest rates. A fluctuating market saw the portfolio peak at 4.2 million, only to settle at 3.7 million at year end. On the upside, income from interest in our portfolio was 121,000 against the benchmark of 113,000. An excellent indication of the defensive measures put in place by our investment management company, Brewin Dolphin. Overall returns remain broadly in line with previous years at 2.73%. Turning now to expenditure on page 31. As already reported, grants awarded totalled 173,500 during the year. And while seeing an increase of 2.2% from last year, it was still some way off the 250,000 budget and the actuary's prediction of 248,000. However, there are so many variables and uncertainty around the current cost of living crisis that future demand was and is difficult to estimate. We wait to see the impact and applications from our members. 2023 might be the busiest year yet. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Grants Committee and in particular Roger Collins, our Grants Administrator, for his commitment and dedication in taking time to speak with beneficiaries, often acting as a second-line caseworker and a befriender during what can be a difficult time for our members. Turning to page 32 of the annual report, general administration, fees, insurances and rental expenses all ran under budget. Fundraising and publicity costs have increased in the year as we had a full year of events, whereas 2021 was much quieter. We also dipped our toe into donating via a QR code. Costs for travel and expenses were £1,200 over their budget of £3,400, mainly due to holding more meetings in the year than normal and the increase in cost of fuel, which led to an increase in expenditure. Investment managers' fees, the largest expense next to salaries, was £24,000 compared to £26,000 in 2021. This is based on a percentage value of the portfolio, which, as reported, decreased over the year. Governance costs are made up of legal fees, audit and accountancy and meeting expenses. These costs have increased in the previous year to £9,900, primarily due to the focus on the future legal structure of the Trust and holding our annual general meeting in London last May. Cash on deposit at the end of the year in the Trust Bank accounts totalled 509,800 at year end. And finally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our investment manager, Chris Nolte, here with us today from Brune Dolphin, for looking after the Trust portfolio so wisely through these uncertain times. And thanks to our auditors, Gavin Witter, also here with us today, and his client manager, Carla Venables, for their ongoing advice and support. And to our many supporters, too many to mention, we give our heartfelt thanks. This ends my report.
Okay, we now move on to item 4 on the agenda, and I invite Commodore Catherine Jordan, our Vice Chairman, to propose adoption of the annual report, balance sheet and statement of accounts for the year ended 31st of December 2022.
Your Royal Highness, Lord Lieutenant, Vice Presidents, Trust officials, ladies and gentlemen, I propose that the 80th annual report, together with the balance sheet and statement of accounts as audited for the year ended 31st of December 2022, be adopted and circulated.
And Mrs. Alison Gott, Trustee, to second the resolution.
Mrs. Alison Gott, Trustee. Your Royal Highness, Lord Lieutenant, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I second this proposal.
May I now have a show of hands of all in favour? Are there any against? Thank you. The motion is carried. Item 5 then. While there are no changes to the composition of the Central Committee this year, members are now asked to approve the list of those nominated for office in 2023 to 2024, a copy of which has been previously circulated and is also on your seat. The Central Committee unanimously supports all these nominations. I now invite Mrs. Jeanette Crisp, Trustee, to propose the nominations for the Central Committee and our Vice Presidents to be adopted.
Mrs. Jeanette Crisp, Trustee. Your Royal Highness, Lord Lieutenant, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I propose that the nominations for the role of Vice President and the Central Committee be adopted.
And Mrs. Veronica Radakin, Trustee, to second the resolution.
Mrs. Veronica Radakin, Your Royal Highness, Madam Chairman, Lord Lieutenant, ladies and gentlemen, I second this proposal.
Thank you. May I now have a show of hands of all in favour? Are there any against? Thank you. That is now carried as well. Item 6. We can now come to the reappointment of our auditors. As you have just heard, Gavin Witter from Gibson Witter is present today, and the Central Committee are very pleased with all the support he and his team have continued to provide to the trustees and the transition team. And I now call upon Commodore Annette Picton, Trustee, to propose the motion for the reappointment of the auditors.
Commodore Annette Picton, Trustee. Your Royal Highness, Lord Lieutenant, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I propose that Gibson Witter, nominated by the Central Committee, be appointed as auditors to the Trust for the current year.
And I invite Commander V. Hooton, Trustee, to second the motion.
Commander Victoria Hooton, Your Royal Highness, Madam Chairman, Lord Lieutenant, ladies and gentlemen, I second this proposal.
Thank you. May I now have a show of hands of all in favour? Are there any against? Thank you. That motion is carried. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the formal voting. Thank you. So now come to item 7 on the agenda, which is our guest speaker. And our guest speaker for today is Lieutenant Michelle Ping. And normally I would give an overview of our guest speaker's background and career, but as that is what Michelle is going to cover, I can't really steal her sandwiches. Suffice to say, though, Michelle has had a very interesting, dynamic and somewhat groundbreaking career to date, hallmarked by never accepting the status quo and demonstrating her personal resilience. I think you will find what she has to say both enlightening and inspiring. So, Michelle, you are very welcome here today, and now I might invite you to take the stage.
Good morning, Your Royal Highness, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me the honour to speak to you today. I'd like to thank Chief Petty Officer Sandra Parkinson for volunteering me, but also she's had my back for the decades that I've known her. So who am I and why am I here today? So I joined the Navy 10th of February 1992. For those of you that can't remember that far back, me included, 31 years ago as a baby WAFU. I joined the Navy. My granddad was in the Navy. He was part of the D-Day landings, Battle of the Atlantic, Malta. And he talked fondly of his time in the Navy, and I thought, oh, I quite fancy, that sounds like a good thing to do. But also, if you remember in the 80s, we had Officer and a Gentleman and Top Gun, and I sort of thought that I might meet myself a naval aviator. I didn't. I sadly ended up on a Pinger squadron down in Culdrose, which was pretty apt considering my surname is Ping, so I think they did it on purpose. And this is a picture of me and my plane captain. You get to put your name on the cab as a badge of honour, but somebody came along in the night and added an extra word to mine. So I joined the Navy in 92, served 6 years full-time and left and then joined the R&R Air Branch. And I've been a reservist ever since. So I've been serving a while. But I'm also a paramedic, so I joined the NHS 20 years ago, worked my way through the ranks. I'm now a senior manager in the NHS. I am responsible for managing and directing national training for the whole country for specialist responders. So you'll see responders who respond to London Bridge, the paramedics that went across to Jersey, the people that work in CBRN environments. So I am the national training manager for these specialist responders. Being a woman in this role is quite difficult because the rest of the people that I work with are all men, and when you get 40 men in a room, it's a bit like herding cats. I'm also a mom, so I had Ellie quite late. She's 6, going on 16, and currently has a much better social life than I do. But that me being a paramedic, the Navy didn't have paramedics when we deployed to Afghanistan. So I thought I'd take my WAFU hat off, put my paramedic hat on, and volunteered to go to Afghanistan in 2011, and was accepted. Prior to going, we went on OPTAG, which was a grueling sort of 2 weeks phase of practicing living in the field. Some ladies that I served with hadn't quite got used to the living in the field. I'm ex-CHF as well, so I don't mind slumming it in a tent. But when they found out that there weren't any plug sockets for their straighteners, it didn't seem to go down right well. But it did prepare me, and the training team that delivered this training, I cannot thank them enough because they did prepare me exceptionally well for what was to come. So on the 2nd of April, this was the last view of Blighty. We were late leaving, thank you, the RAF, and it took us 2 days to get there, and we landed in Afghanistan, and it was 40 degrees. So I'd left in the winter where it was cold, and I got there and it was hot. I was based in Lashkargah, which is in the southern province, a very small place, home to about 1,300 people. It was like a mini bastion, quite basic. We didn't have a McDonald's or a Pizza Hut like they did in Bastion. We had nothing exciting like that. But it was small and friendly, and I worked in the sick bay there. We took over from the army, so when the army had it, it was a med centre. But as soon as the Navy moved in, we took all the med centre signs down, stuck up sick bay and found an ensign from somewhere and put it on the wall, just to stamp our authority. But this is what it was like. Nothing very exciting, probably not hygienic, to be fair. If there's anybody infection prevention control in here, I apologise. But it was a little bit rickety. There's some NHS facilities. My office, where I work, is pretty much like this, falling apart. But it was small and friendly. We were predominantly primary healthcare. I had the pleasure for the first 2 weeks of my deployment managing the diarrhoea and vomiting tent, which, if 40 degrees, the air conditioning didn't work very well, was not particularly a pleasant place to be. So I got a bit naggy about, I'm a paramedic, I shouldn't really be in here, I need to be doing something a bit more suited to my role. We only had one bed, so we were a mini ER, not like Bastion. If you see the film and the footage of Bastion, it's awesome. It was just me, a very small team, one doctor, a DMV 10, and that was it. We predominantly looked after the people that were on the base, but we also had local nationals would be flown in if they'd been injured in IED or crossfires. So we would patch them up as best we could, keep them alive as best we could, and then a man in a van effectively would turn up. We'd put them in the back of the van, and then they would be taken to their local hospital to be dealt with, which as a paramedic is a bit unusual to hand over to somebody that doesn't have any medical care. But it wasn't all work. Oh, the IT. Tell you what. Can you still hear me at the back? Yes. Good. Oh. Okay, so it wasn't all work. We did have quite a bit of downtime. The next slide would have showed me playing beach volleyball. We created a sand pit, because as you can imagine in Afghanistan we had a lot of sand. So we created a volleyball pitch, but also the NAFI kindly donated several boxes of paraphernalia for the royal wedding for the Prince and Princess of Wales. So we got to celebrate that. But after a period of time, I was nagging the warrant officer there to sort of let me out, I need to be doing something. So I joined the army, effectively. So I was seconded to the Sea Squadron Scots Dragoon Guards, and they are, for those of you that know, they are from the lowlands of Scotland. Apologies to any Scottish people in the room. Were very broad Scottish, and I did not understand a word that they said. And they could not for the life of them understand why there was a woman, reservist, paramedic, aircraft engineer with them. You know, there's no ships in the Navy, in the desert. So it took a little bit of persuasion for them to accept me. But I was a lot older than them. If you think some of these young boys were 18, I was 40, I think, at the time. And we got into a routine of I would train them, we'd practice drills and skills, so if one of them unfortunately did become injured, we got into the habit and the swing of things. Oh, thank you, Mum. You're awesome.
Why am I caught up?
That's fine. Yes, Mum. Thank you.
See if it works.
Yeah. Thank you, Mum. Who can say that they've had somebody senior pressing your buttons for them? But they were a nice group of lads, looked after me, they had my back, there were no problems. I then joined A Company 4 Scots. They are from the other side of Scotland, their accents were a bit gentler, but they equally could not understand why they had this woman arrive from nowhere to be their medic effectively. And these are some of the guys who I served with. If you can see this young chap here, this is Sean Winton, he was only 19, very young. He was one of the squadron sharpshooters who unfortunately took his own life last year due to the pressures of being away. These young boys, I was effectively their mother and mothered them for the 6 months that I was with them. So we moved from Lash, we moved to Patrol Base Atal, very basic. Effectively, what goes in the left-hand side is a plastic bag, and that's what you deal with. And then we moved into a 4-star compound. So we take over compounds in villages, we'd go out on patrols, probably coming under fire at least once, twice, 3, 4 times a day, you sort of lose track. Somebody, from my experience, even though we've sort of played at it with CHF, for this to happen for real is a very frightening experience. The army, very gung-ho, they're advancing to contact. I'm laid on the deck going, what are you doing? We're advancing to contact, Michelle, come on. I'm like, I'm in the Navy. We don't do that. So then they'd pick me up and I'd run with them and we were okay. There was no washing facilities, no showering facilities. There was nothing really. So if you can imagine being a woman, where you don't have access to toilets at certain times, it's very difficult. But we soon get into a routine. The lads accept you. We all wash together, wet whitewash effectively. That's as best as we could. Wherever I go, I was putting Navy signs everywhere, just because it annoyed them, really. This was our staple diet. pot noodles, so we wrote to Pot Noodle and they sent us a load of stuff out. I hate tuna ration packs, but I made the mistake of telling the army that I hated tuna ration packs. So when supplies would come out to us, I only ever got tuna ration packs. I did get my payback, though, at times. And as I said, at 4-star facilities, if we could find water, we literally put it in a trough and washed. That was it. That's how we were. So one of the main reasons that I'm here today is to talk about this young man. So this is Highlander Craig Patterson. I didn't particularly like him very much, to be honest. I thought he was a bit gobby, and I didn't really get on with him. But on July the 2nd, we went out on an op. If you can imagine sort of Call of Duty type thing, we all traipsed onto the helicopters at Bastion, the Chinooks. We land in an area that's never had any sort of military interaction before. They land, we all fan out, we all get off, the helicopters take off, you're on your own, and there's silence for about 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden, all hell is breaking loose. And on this day, it was a very hot day, it was a very tiring day, and I was very frightened. But the lads, you know, like, oh, this is what we joined up for, Michelle, come on, get with it, you know. But I said, you won't be laughing until one of you gets shot. Unfortunately, Craig didn't keep his head down and got shot in the head. He was on a roof providing covering fire. We were in a compound. We couldn't get out. Nobody was coming. And he, unfortunately, took a round to the left side of his head. Somebody shouted, man down. And me, being the medic, and probably a bit stupid, just got my bag, went up on the roof, found him there in a not a very pleasant state. Did what I could. We were still under fire at this time, so I laid on top of him to stop him getting shot anymore, which was another stupid thing that I did, because as I was laid there were lots of splashes where the rounds were sort of hitting quite close to me. And I was, but you don't think about that, you just get on with it. So somebody threw me up a stretcher. I was like, well, I don't want a stretcher. So I dragged him to the edge of the roof, shouted to the biggest lads in the squadron, said, right, catch him, and I just threw him off the roof and said, right, off we go. Then started the 2-mile extrication. The RAF wouldn't come because it was too hot. That's not hot weather. It was just too hot for them to land. So we effectively carried him for about 2 miles. That's me, the little one at the back, frantically trying to write a CAS card, which was appalling, that just said gunshot wound, left head, unconscious. There we go. Craig at this time had come round. But if you know anything about head injuries, people become quite combative when they've got a really nasty head injury, so all he wanted to do was get off the stretcher, which was a good sign. If he'd have not been that combative, I would have been really worried. An American journalist took this photo. I've since spoken to him, and he sort of described it from his point of view as it was a bit scary. Yeah, it was. Luckily, Craig, they flew him to Kandahar, where they looked after him. But once he'd gone and it had all calmed down, 2 things I realised. One, I'd not got my weapon, which, as you can imagine, because I'd left it behind because I was a bit busy and I thought I was going to get trooped because I'd left my weapon behind. And secondly, how was I then going to keep the rest of the team going? Because all everybody wanted to do then was just go and kick in some doors and do bad things to bad people. And inside, I was crying a lot. But you can't show that, especially as the medic and the mother of the group. You have to sort of, it's going to be all right, nobody worry. And people say, is he going to be all right, Michelle? And I'd be like, yeah, he's be fine, it's just a graze. You know, you just bounce it off, it's just a graze. But I was genuinely didn't think he was going to make it. But I wasn't going to tell this lot because we had another 3 days. Didn't stop, the op didn't stop, we still had to do stuff. But finally, after a very eventful few more months, I got to go home. I did volunteer to stay an extra month, but I didn't tell the NHS I volunteered. Told them that I was told I had to stay. But on the day that I left, I was very cross. I left the guys. I said to one of the corporals, I said, look after him, look after each other, just be safe. Oh, it'll be all right, Michelle, don't worry about it, don't panic. I got to Bastion, was packing my bags, somebody came to fetch me, you need to come to the sick bay. The corporal that I'd said look after everybody, they were in a vehicle that had an IED strike and he was exceptionally poorly, along with the team. So I sat by his bed just before I was due to fly home and I was very angry with the world and very sad. And I was very angry at him because I'd told him to be careful and it's like he didn't listen. And unfortunately, he lost his legs. He didn't die, he lost his legs, didn't lose any brain cells, just still as daft as ever. But I finally made it home. This is me on the way home. For me, decompression was Cyprus, but because I went as an augmentee, and I think this was a bit of not a failing, but an observation, I didn't have anybody else. I didn't have anybody because I didn't know anybody, so I just latched onto some RAF people because they were quite friendly, and we just went to the bar. I didn't even have a drink. I didn't even feel like a drink. I just wanted to get home. But this is Headley Court, so that's Craig with half his head missing. He's now got a titanium plate in, so you can't see that he's been shot. Smudge, no legs, because obviously he's lost his legs. And Rav, who was in the vehicle as well, he broke one of his legs. So I would visit them when I got home. I would visit them quite often. And that was sort of the end of my Afghanistan story, or I thought. But then somebody put me forward for a Sun Military Award that I won. And you know what the Sun's like? They like to big up things and create drama. I didn't know that Craig and his mum and his girlfriend were going to be there, so I go out on stage. Philip Schofield gives me the award, Amanda Holden, thank you for your service, Reservist of the Year, and we've got a surprise for you. And this is the first time I'd met the family, so out come the family. Obviously, I'm ugly crying right here, holding it together as best as I could. And we had a great night. I was quite cross with him because he was in the room across from me and I didn't even know. They kept it really well. And I met a whole heap of people. I met Ross Kemp, David Beckham. Oh, he's so lovely. I got to sit next to Prince Harry for the whole dinner, which was great. But I did upset him because I got my award. I met Peter Andre backstage. I went back to the table and I said, oh my God. And he's like, I know, congratulations, you've done really well. I said, no, I've just met Peter Andre. And I said, look, I'm really sorry, sir, I've got to go. There's David Beckham. And he's like, and I just sort of went, I'll see you later. And I effectively blew him out for David Beckham. I'm continuing the royal theme, ma'am. I was presented my Afghanistan medal by the Duchess of Cornwall at the time, here at Whale Island, in a very cold ceremony. It was freezing. I was also awarded a mention in dispatches. And ma'am, thank you. You presented me with my QVRM. And ma'am, thank you for the letter that your office sent me when I came back from Afghanistan. So, moving on. Somebody volunteered me to go in Good Housekeeping magazine. I won Yorkshire Woman of the Year, which is the biggest honour if you're from Yorkshire. Forget the Sun Military Awards and David Beckham, I won Yorkshire Woman of the Year. And then once it had all calmed down, it was suggested to me by the R&R Air Branch Lieutenant Commander Gary Duffield that perhaps it was about time I grew up and stopped sailing a bit close to the wind. So they said that, why don't I commission? Yeah, great. So I failed. First time round the boy, I was very poorly. I thought I was having a stroke. So this is the second time round, a very proud day for me and my family. And for the R&R Air Branch, I was and still am the only 22-year 3-badge AB to commission. I'm very proud. I wasn't allowed to have my picture taken with Captain T at the time because I out-medalled him, and he didn't like that. So this is where we are now. This is Easter. So we keep in touch, we fly and see each other all the time. Craig, the chap in the middle, who's got a sort of semi-normal looking head, his wife Louise in the middle. Baby Emma is the new addition, Hannah's on the left, Scott is the one in the middle, and that's my bundle of trouble in the middle there, that's Ellie. And we keep in touch. And we are joined together forever. We can't break that bond. And there's my granddad, Reg, the legend. Sadly no longer with us, but what a legend he was. Thank you, ladies.
Your Royal Highness, Lord Lieutenant, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Lieutenant Commander Jane Pitsey and I sit on the WRNS Benevolent Trust Grants Committee. For those of you in the room who are frequent flyers to the WRNS BT AGM will know that over the last 7 years I've been volunteered to offer the vote of thanks, and I usually prepare something in advance and try and keep it appropriate. And I've been listening to some 7 really inspiring people over the last years, and I'm quite emotional, sorry, but I think that today's probably the most inspiring, funny, inspirational speakers that we've had in the short time I've been doing this. It's not been 82 years or since 1942, but so I'm very grateful, and it's my privilege to offer you a vote of thanks on behalf of the WRNS Benevolent Trust. A hero is a word that we all know is used far too often, but I know that hero is what Craig Patterson actually does call you. And I will read. What I normally do is do a bit of social media stalking ahead of it's not that creepy, don't worry. Ahead of doing the vote of thanks, and on your mention in dispatches, if I can find it now before I steam up a bit, it says that you undoubtedly saved the life of the Highlander. So Chief Parkinson, never mind iron girders, we've got a woman here who's made of steel. And not only that, top 10% air engineer, okay? So we all know that, okay? So your calm, selfless actions, again, this is a quote from your mention of dispatches, your calmness inspired those around you to redouble their fire, which allowed you to extract Craig. Okay, you pushed him off the roof, but we'll forget that. Which I didn't know until today. And for you to tab 2 miles to the evacuation point is, I'm sure that his family are so grateful to you. So as your appointer and your career manager, which is very odd as well, I know how hard you fought to go on ops, because you weren't a medic in the R&R, and I know there was some debate about you going as an air engineer, but my goodness, I'm pretty sure that people are so pleased that you did. Mentioned in dispatches, QVRM Millies, so that's Millie, Molly, Michelle, Millie, Molly. But you mentioned Peter Andre, but you didn't mention that you met Lorraine Kelly. Okay, so Ellie Ray, she's not called Cruz or Gear, but I'm sure that she's going to grow up having a mother who's incredibly inspiring. And okay, so Chris isn't Tom Cruise, but he is an engineer. And I think even Mrs. Gott, who's a very, very fervent Yorkshire woman, will forgive you for wearing red instead of white. But again, that must have been an incredible honour for you. So, Lieutenant Michelle Ping, there can be only one. Thank you very much for speaking us today.
Jane, thank you very much for that vote of thanks. Now, as I mentioned at the start, once all matters pertaining to the AGM have concluded, we will be holding our extraordinary general meeting. Now, it's not my place to influence you on how, as entitled members, you may wish to vote on the future of the Trust. But as the Chair of the Trust, I would like you to know that your trustee board has worked extremely hard over the last 2 years to identify the options available for the future and come up with the proposal that is on the table this afternoon. The beneficiaries and how it might impact them moving forward has always been the guiding principle of all the work we have done and the lengthy debates that we have had. We have also been keenly aware of the need to communicate the proposals to members through every medium available to us. We know we will not have reached everyone, but I hope those members that are here today and intending to vote feel informed and empowered to use their votes accordingly. Now, the format of the AGM, a run-through of why we must consider the future, the proposal itself, and how the voting will be conducted, will be covered once we reconvene after lunch. For now then, I would like to formally close the AGM and thank you all for joining us today. I hope you enjoy the refreshments that will now be available. And if you wish to relive this experience or know of other former Wrens who could not join us today, then do remember that a film of the AGM will be uploaded onto the Trust website in due course. Thank you.
Well,
I keep on wanting to go back.
Living where?
Oh yes, the business secretary, yes. I came over to the relic when I had the things in the museum, so I was loads of change to it, but it had Association of Relics. From here, a direct. very nice to see you. How are you?
Very well.
Enjoying it?
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Yes, visitors coming.
From
Sale.
Oh, Sale.
Greenwich Citizens Advice. I think you visited us in 2018, my predecessor, last campaign. Yeah, so.
Indeed, nice to see you. Yeah. All working here at the moment.
She works in the career management.
Instant instruction. Hopefully helpful, actually. But is it matter of interest? Is this, do you know anything about trust, sort of from training?
No.
No, so, or indeed any of the part of that. Here?
I'm here now.
Here? Yeah, quite a mixture.
Met some other people.
Very good. Reminds you what roles there were. And they've grown a bit. Have you heard about that before?
Yes, so I'm here at Excellent.
I'm just doing phase 2 sort of staff mentoring.
And here? That's very grand. Who does this? I think somebody in the mess. I sincerely hope that's not the last time it was signed. Oh no, they do individual pages, don't they? This is going back a bit, doesn't it, I think? Yeah, I could remember. I had to sign my name. So constant source of
Yes, I work with training design. I basically drive a desk now, but yeah, it's very, very
good.
good.
Speakers like that do sort of focus them brain a bit, don't they?
So funny as well. Really funny, very humble and quite emotional. I'd be honest with you. I think she's been signed up